Hey watch friends, after years of waiting, the Zelos Hammerhead is back in titanium. This is one that I'm really excited to check out. We're going to dive straight into the watch itself because I actually already did an unboxing with the packaging. If you haven't checked that out already, I do encourage you to go back and do so. They actually have all new packaging for this one and it's really slick. It's a 3-watch roll, very nice touch. So first, just getting right into the specs on this before we take a deeper dive. This comes standard with the Zelos 1-year warranty, like all the other Zelos models. As far as the dimensions, the case on my calipers is coming in at 43.9 millimeters, measured roughly from the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock. As you can see, it extends fairly far past the bezel. As for the bezel, it does step down significantly to 39.8 millimeters, so closer to a 40 millimeter range at the bezel. The lugs are a standard 22 millimeters. The lug to lug is a 48.9 millimeters. So the combination of the shorter lug to lug as well as the sunken in bezel actually makes this, as we'll talk about, wear a lot smaller than the 44 would denote, as we'll see on my 6.5 inch wrist. The thickness is coming in at 14.7 millimeters, so definitely not the slimmest in the world, but that is including this crystal. And as you can see, it is a subtly domed crystal there. That is a sapphire crystal, and it does have inner AR coating as you'd expect. So while this isn't the slimmest in the world, this Hammerhead 3, which this is based on the Hammerhead 3, is definitely slimmed out compared to the Hammerhead 2 that we'll look at later on, and it doesn't really, to me, wear very thick on the wrist, despite the fact that it certainly is not a slim watch either. As far as the movement, it comes with a Seiko NH35. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with it, but it's your typical, it's a nice workhorse, automatic movement, has your hacking, hand winding, lower beat, all those kind of things. Around 40-hour power reserve as well. The water resistance is coming in at 300 meters or 30 atmospheres. As far as the weight, this is the exciting part. So changing this over from the prior stainless steel and bronze that we've seen the most of, this titanium, sized to my 6.5 inch wrist on this bracelet, is only coming in at 151.3 grams. That is a huge weight reduction from the prior. I believe the stainless steel was around 205 grams. So you're talking a significant reduction there, and you very much do feel it on the wrist. So now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into the watch itself and learn more about what it's like to actually live with. First, for the colors. They have an abundance of options available. There's the chalk gray that we're looking at today, which is a really slick one, and we'll of course talk about that a lot. There's also a blue titanium version, which has a unique PVD coating, so it has a very distinctive shade to it. There is a full lume double orange version. There's a meteorite version. There's a hammered red version. That's a really slick dial, and we've seen one that was like that in the past in teal on the Aurora. There's also the return of the mosaic mother of pearl. That's always a fan favorite. And then one that I don't have pictured is a Timascus. That's going to be a Timascus dial as well as bezel. That one hasn't been released yet. However, more information to come soon on that. As far as the dial characteristics, this one is really unique, and I mentioned in the unboxing that this is personally probably my favorite, even though it's one of the more subdued. This chalk gray is actually an automotive paint, so that's applied to the dial itself, and then that's topped with a gloss clear coat. That gives a really unique effect that's hard to pick up fully on camera, but I can tell you in living with it, especially when the light hits it just right, it's kind of like a venturine where it just has that glossiness, and it actually reminds me in many respects of a gray enamel. I think is the closest to it, but with more depth to it than a gray enamel would have. So you get that glossiness and luster while still having some of the radiance of having that chameleon kind of shade. Just like if you've seen this car on vehicles where it shifts, sometimes it looks blue, sometimes it looks gray. It's really ever shifting depending on the way the light's hitting it and the lighting conditions. The dial itself has printing at both the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position. At the 12 o'clock, you have the Zelos logo, and at the 6 o'clock, you have the name Hammerhead, as well as the water resistance. The Hammerhead, as we'll see on the second hand, is an orange accent on this particular variant, and I love the way it complements this grayish blue coloration. I think that was a perfect accent choice there. Additionally, you'll see printing on the chapter ring, and as you can see on the chapter ring, it is a nice contrast, so excellent legibility there, but it does have your printed hashes all the way around. Then down at the 6 o'clock, you do have a date window, just a standard square cutout date window, but I like the 6 o'clock orientation. As far as the hardware, the handset on this is going to be a direct carryover from the Hammerhead 3, so that one changed up from the prior variants, and you can see it is a paddle style handset for both your hour and minute, with of course the hour being wider and then, as you'd expect, the minute being longer. The second hand is a shovel style with a kind of like a cathedral cut across accent, and then also the accent color that we already talked about as well. I think that's well done. In this particular variant, they went with a gloss black for the finish of both the hands and the markers, and I think that was perfectly chosen. Excellent legibility for that in contrast, and I really like the way the black gloss plays against that glossy ceramic or a chalk coloration of the dial, so you get that gray and that blue with that black. Both of them I think pop really well, so nicely done there. As far as the markers themselves, these are going to be pentagons for your 12, 3, and 9 position, and then the rest of them are going to be varied rectangles, consistent with the exception of the 6 o'clock where it is shrunk it down, though you do still have a loom touch even with having the date window at the 6 o'clock position, as we'll see momentarily. Which, speaking of the loom, as we've seen on other Zelos models and other Hammerhead variants, the loom is just, I mean, it's insane. It's always extremely strong application on these, and this one is no exception. It glows like a torch. It picks up any even hint of sunlight, and it glows very brightly. I haven't had any issues with legibility or endurance or performance or anything. It's Zelos loom. It's fantastic. This one does also have loom on the crown as well, as you can see there, so that's a nice accent touch as well. Shifting over to the bezel on this, consistent with the past Hammerheads, again, as we already looked at, is significantly set back. However, because it rides fairly high, I haven't found too much of an issue grabbing a hold of that. As you can see here, it does have a thick gear cut for the pattern, and it is relatively sharp, but in a positive way, in that it doesn't ever interfere as far as for usage, but it does give you some decent grip and traction as you grab a hold of that, and we'll check out the action momentarily. The bezel insert on this, while it might look like it's a titanium or stainless bezel insert, this is actually a gray ceramic. That was a really cool thing for them to change over to that, and I'm very glad they did so. Keep the scratch resistance while still give that stainless or titanium look, and I think that's a nice touch. When it's in bright sunlight, certainly you can see a little more of the matte or deeper coloration to this. However, ordinarily in regular lighting, I can't really tell that much of a difference, so it blends very seamlessly, and I like that. Additionally, it does have a bluish-gray accent running for your first 15 minutes, and that complements the dial perfectly. I like the way that adds to the cohesiveness of this overall design, and I think that's a great touch and accent there. As with the past ones, you can see it does have triangle pip at the 12 o'clock position, then you have your rectangles, and then it picks up at the 20, and then you have your numerals alternating for your even and the 10-minute increments there as you go around. As far as the bezel action, I'm sure you can pick up on that. It is very tactile. It is a fairly stiff action. I don't think negatively so. Certainly you could have your fingers slip off of this because it is on the stiffer side, but I kind of like the action. I like the fact that it will definitely stay put. Wherever you get it, it's going to stay situated there. It won't pop free at all, but certainly manipulation-wise, some of you might find this to be a little hard, especially if you have thicker fingers, might find it a little bit hard to grab a hold of with that stiffer action, but I like it overall. It's pretty much to my taste. As far as the case, one of the biggest things to note, so I already mentioned that this is, of course, titanium. So you've got titanium for the case, for the bezel, as well as the bracelet. The clasp, I believe, is going to be stainless steel. Those usually are there. However, the big thing with this is this actually has a 1200 Vickers coating or hardening treatment that's applied as well. So you get way better scratch resistance than even stainless steel while having the light weight of titanium. So that is very welcome, and I'm very pleased for that. This is going to have the signature Hammerhead profile to it. So we saw this on the Hammerhead 3, it carries directly over. What you're going to note is it does have nice curves underneath, so it actually has like a nice flowing line there, but the rest of it is going to be fairly angular. You've got slab construction, but then again, here it kind of rounds out as you look at the lug profile. So yes, it's a little bit angular, but it's kind of like a rounded angle. I guess that's maybe an oxymoron, but that's what it puts me in mind of. Very much like the Hammerhead Shark itself, so I think it's aptly named in that respect. The lugs do downturn significantly, and as you can see there, it's nice a flow to that. I like the way they do that, but they bring it right down to the caseback. So the caseback is a little bit on the thick side, but you don't get that flying saucer effect. It nests pretty decently into the wrist, and then with the lugs downturning into that, no problems there at all, and I like the way that wears. As far as the lugs, just like we've seen in the past, it's relatively flat, subtle curve in there, of course fitted end links. You get the nice cuts across the lugs themselves. And then on the 4 o'clock side, or the 3 o'clock side, but at the 4 o'clock position, you can see that this does have a somewhat integrated crown guard for that built into the case. So it's nested in there nicely, so it partially covers the crown, but you have enough crown coming out that it doesn't impede as far as for your wrist or anything, because it comes fairly in line with the case, but there's plenty to grab a hold of there, and it does leave a fair amount of that exposed as well. As far as the crown itself, it is coming in at 6.8 millimeters. It is, as you would expect, a screw-in construction for that. As we already saw here, it is at the 4 o'clock position, and additionally, as we've seen, it is both signed and loom applied to that. Very easy to grip a hold of. The pattern changes up from the bezel, which I think is a good call. I think it incorporates well, but what they basically did is took a similar design, but tightened that up, and I think it is much more conducive. If they did that wide spacing like that for a perfect match, it'd be hard to grip a hold of. So I think that's well chosen. Shifting over to the caseback. The caseback, as with the prior variants, is a screw-in construction. It has nice keyholes for that, which is always my preference, where they have the inlaid keyholes instead of on the edge. I think it looks nice, and additionally, it keeps from having any sharp edges or anything along those lines. It has triple finishing on that, so it is going to be blasting in the center with polished accents for the sharks as well as for the coral reef or what have you around that, and then it also has brushing applied as well. So nice use of texture there. I really like that. The signature characteristic is, of course, the 2 hammerheads that are swimming in the center. And then you do have clean text as you work your way around the caseback itself. Shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet on this, again, as with the Hammerhead 3, is 22 millimeters at the lugs, and it does taper down to 20 millimeters at the clasp. It once again is going to have sort of male end links, and I say sort of because they have such a pronounced straight drop. They almost actually drop back underneath of the case the way that they tuck in. So in many respects, they wear very similarly to a female, but I think having a more seamless look to that. So I think it's very well chosen there. The bracelet is, just as we've seen in the past, going to be fairly angular. So it has nice sharp angles all the way around, but without actually having the sharp edges. So I think that's a line that is well walked. It maintains the comfort of having nice, smooth, broken edges, but at the same time, it has the industrial look of the relatively sharp edges and flats. The links are held in with screws, which if you do need a screwdriver, I have one link down in the description. Do highly encourage you to have a good screwdriver on hand to adjust these, but that makes for a nice, easy adjustment. The articulation and comfort are very good, especially with the reduced weight of this one. So I'm very pleased with that overall. Really no complaints whatsoever about this bracelet. I think it's nicely done. Unfortunately, it does not have quick release spring bars, as we'll talk about. Shifting over to the clasp. The clasp on this is similar to ones we've seen in the past, but it is actually a different variant. We've seen ones like this, and we'll look at it next to the Aurora clasp. So it is stylistically similar, but it's finished a little differently. This one is a full brush with just blasted inlay, and I think it's very good looking. I will say up front, this is actually probably my favorite clasp that I've seen from them to date. Favorite style, but also favorite finish. It's a double pusher construction. It has a milled bridge, but the biggest thing far and away is you've got this toolless micro adjust. So you just push there, you can slide all the way out. Some people don't like the way this protrudes as far as it doesn't match directly with the bracelet. You know, it's under the wrist, it matches with the clasp and basically just elongates the clasp. I love this clasp. I can't really complain here at all. Very, very easy to see exactly where you're adjusting. That's one of the things I like about it, and it's so tactile with the clicks. It does not ratchet though, so do be aware of that. But it's really fantastic, and like I said, probably my favorite of the bunch. All right, so now that we have a better feel for the watch, let's go ahead and bring in some comps for different reasons. First, I wanted to bring in, this is the Hammerhead 3 in stainless steel. I want to just give you an idea as far as the difference of the coloration in the hue here. You can see these do have a distinct look to them. It's not a huge difference with the coating and everything, but you can tell, you know, layout, of course, it's very recognizable and they're almost indistinguishable, but just the coloration and everything is a little bit different. In the weight, I can tell you in hand, huge difference between these two. Very dramatic there. Here it is next to the Hammerhead 2, so you can see as we looked at in the past and did a comparison video, the handset's completely different, the dial layout's completely different, everything about it, just a really different vibe. But the biggest thing is check out that thickness difference. I know it's on a pillow here, but you can see enough of it because it rides so high. I still really like the Hammerhead 2, but it is a huge difference in terms of thickness. I mean, that's dramatic if you look at that. Here it is next to one that we looked at recently. This is the Revelot Admiral GMT, and this just gives you an idea as far as sizing. This one's stated as 42, whereas this is stated at 44 rather, but you can see the dials are relatively similar. And then bringing it in, this is next to the Aurora, and I wanted to show you the front first because this is a 39, this is a 44, but look at these dials. I think they actually compare relatively closely. The Aurora in some respects I think has a little more dial presence, so that just gives you an idea as far as how size deceiving this is or how size versatile it is depending on what you're looking for. but this is the big thing I want to look at. So this is the Aurora Clasp that we saw here, and then here's the Hammerhead, of course, on the right side. But you can see the finishing. I don't know about you. Let me know what you think. But I personally much prefer this. I like the clean look of it. Across the board, I think this is really sharp. So I'm very pleased with that changeover as well. All right, so there we have it as far as the basic specs and feel and living conditions with this. Let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the overall summary. First, for the positives, this is a huge increase in comfort. The weight reduction, while the Hammerhead I found wore relatively nicely, especially for as large of a watch as it seems to be, it definitely did weigh on you. Coming in at around 205 grams on my size to my 6.5 inch wrist, it definitely was one that you never forgot you were wearing. This one certainly, I still would say that you won't forget it. It still has that heft. It has everything that you would expect, the robustness, the stoutness that you come to know from the Hammerhead, but at the same time, it now is much more of a middleweight category instead of a heavyweight, and I think that very much to me is welcome. I think overall the balance as part of the comfort is perfect. The head doesn't feel too top heavy. The bracelet I think rounds it out nicely as well, so it's just very comfortable. The value is excellent. These are starting at around $429 at launch, and that to me, for everything you're getting, titanium hardened coating, sapphire crystal, the fantastic dial options this has, the amazing toolless micro adjust clasp, as well as just the overall fit and finish, which is really quite superb for $429. So I don't think you can beat that. The dial options to me are gorgeous. I love this variant. I know it won't be for everybody, but hopefully you have a little better of a feel for how much of a gorgeous effect this can have in real world, though I honestly still didn't do it justice. And this is one that to me is surprisingly versatile as far as the sizing. On my 6.5 inch wrist, as we've seen, I think it fits just fine, but at the same time, it does have plenty of heft to it and plenty of presence to it that if you have a larger wrist, I think it'll be just fine too. Some might find the dial to be a bit small, and we'll talk about that here momentarily, but for me, I think it walks the line nicely, so you kind of have the offset. If you have a small wrist, the smaller dial makes it feel a little smaller for you, and if you have a large wrist, the large case makes it feel a little larger for you. But as far as the negatives, this is still going to be, at the end of the day, this is going to be too large for some and too small for others. For larger wristed folks, I think they might be disappointed if they usually like 44 millimeter watches. This wears smaller. But for smaller wristed folks, at the end of the day, even though it is shrunken down, it still is a 44 millimeter case, so it's definitely not an insubstantial watch. So that's something to be aware of. We mentioned the quick release spring bars. Because of the way this cuts in, I believe that's why they took them away, is it actually was hard to access. For me though, I could still do it, and I very much preferred having the convenience of the quick release spring bars, so that's something that I would have liked to have seen them continue through. And then this is such a stupid thing, but I've got to mention it. Titanium. Listen to that rattle. I don't know what the heck it is about titanium. I've noticed this in the past as well. It always just has a little more of a rattly feel and presence to it as you're handling them. Get a little more of that jingle. I don't notice it in usage, and like I said, it's a trivial thing because the reality is it has no functional impact, and this is just kind of a reviewer comment here, but it's something that in handling, it always sticks out to me, so I did want to mention it to you in case you notice it as well. Certainly not indicative of poor quality. Everything is fit very well. It's excellent job overall. So where does that leave us? Total for me, in case it hasn't been clear from the feedback that I've given throughout this video as well as the unboxing, this is the Hammerhead to get in my opinion. Of all the variants we've had out there, I like the Hammerhead 3 style. I think that's nice, but the titanium here with the weight balance and just the overall fit and finish and everything that you get with that, I think it's just fantastic. It wears great, it looks great, still has the presence to it without having that weight that some people are going to find off-putting, myself included. It also still has that signature look, and to me this very much is a signature Zelos piece, so I really appreciate that about the Hammerhead line. And it still has all of the presence that you'd expect, whether you go with one of the more bold dial choices or you go with one that's more subdued like this one, where it still has a lot of beauty to it, but at the same time it isn't as flashy or in your face. They got a little bit of something for everyone. So there you have it. I hope this video has been enjoyable for you. Please do drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you like this one? Which particular color variant is your favorite? And as always, if you liked the video, tap that like button. And if you haven't already done so, what are you waiting for? Tap that subscribe button. Always have more new content coming. Thanks for watching.